Ah, the dirty old blog.
How's it going? Okay, I'm going to start this again. I didn't know if I had the camera on, but you won't know it anyway. I'll just cut it out. So anyway, what I'm going to talk about today is the difference between desire and enjoyment or joy. Seems odd, right? But I think it comes down to a lot I have been talking about, and this idea of the nature of thought. And I'm not talking about these things because I feel like I have any kind of sense of authority on any kind of topic or blah, 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 whatever word you want to put on it. But I just feel it's something that through default and through actually my own struggles with this stuff, it may have spurred me to focus a little bit more on these things than maybe others naturally would. Or not, I don't know. But I think it's important. And it really comes down to the nature of thought. So, and I'll get to, and I guess we'll come up to what actually is the point. Okay, enjoyment and joy, right? And the difference between that and desire. Joy or enjoyment is when in the moment we come upon something, whether it be a sunset or a beautiful woman or whatever it may be for you, and we have an experience in that moment that was totally unplanned and it just emerges from the moment. Now, desire is when we have a moment like that of joy or enjoyment and we want to have it again. And what we do is we start thinking about and planning on having it again. And now we desire for that experience. And what this brings up is we bring thought into something that had emerged in the present moment. And what it creates fear. Because what if we can't have that moment again? What are the things that will get in the way of us having what we desire? So now, fear is brought into the picture. And this is interesting. Because it also has to do with security. And what is being suggested is that one of the problems we fall into is that thought perhaps oversteps its place in the life experience. Because there's numerous different forms of security that we grasp to. And when we do that, it bars us from having that joy in the moment. Okay, so now, basically, let that sit in a little bit, I guess. But it's really simple. This is not intellectual gymnastics. It's really just stepping back from hyper thought, constantly thinking. We've come to rely so much on the thought process as the means of fulfilling desires that we never think of the difference between desire and joy. Because we have cultivated in our society that it is our intent, it is our, we are responsible for creating this desire or a goal and then finding the means to attain it. Which I'm not saying is totally bad, but when it overshadows the present moment and how we can have joy in that moment, it does become a problem. Okay, so now, but the interesting thing that now comes up right away is fear. And because we may not get that thing that we desire. And then we take actions in order to secure that we will get that thing, or that someone won't be an obstacle toward getting that thing. Okay. But to make it clear, the point of this is not to call out desire or pursuits as negative, bad, blah, blah. It is more to kind of observe the nature of thought and how an overreaching of thought creates our own self-delusion and creates our own problems. Now, some would say, have we ever thought about thought itself? It just seems like we are thought. Thought is what we are. But this may not be. And I'm just saying this generally, and just to throw things out there for us to maybe think of. A guy suggested that, you know, when we turned into human beings, our brain had enlarged. But when our brain enlarged, there wasn't a manual to teach us how to think. We were just thinking at a larger capacity. And some would say that thought was misplaced, and we made mistakes early on that we were given our brain, but we never really learned how to use it properly. I mean, we could create phenomenal technology, but there are areas that maybe we just haven't evolved. I mean, look what we're doing to each other. Look what we're doing to the planet where we live. I mean, we're destroying that which sustains us. I mean, it's something to think about. And some would say that it is in this desire for security. And let me go into further. And these are just suggestions to think about. Is it possible that when we were first learning how to navigate secure for us food and shelter and these things at a basic level, that, well, we learned how that you needed to plant seeds at a particular time, and you needed to do certain things to yield a crop so you could eat well and have some food in store, right? So what is being suggested is that the skill of thought to have external security was used internally, psychologically, to have inner security. And the suggestion is that it's misplaced. And that's why we struggle with a lot of the issues that we struggle with. Self-delusion. And that could be in many different ways. Greed. It's a form of security. You know, got to get mine so no one else has it, or I need to be in a position of where I won't be leveraged, or I have power to leverage. Who knows? Or fear. Again, misplaced security. I mean, all the emotions can be related to time and thought, which in some ways is the same thing. And this, I'll explain how. And this goes back to joy. If I am enjoying the moment, it has happened and I'm moving on. and it can be left there because I'm not hoping that that happens again. Now, when I create desire, going back to this, I'm hoping that that same experience will happen again and I need to make it happen. Or I don't want a bad experience that I have had, say I was hurt in some way, and I say, oh, I don't want that to happen again, so I desire to create some kind of security to avoid that. And now this is thought and time. But I'm always then I become wrapped up in the realm of thought, in the mechanism of thought, because it's every moment it changes. So every moment I'm trying to think, I have to think of a different way of applying the same means of security that the brain has come up with. It's like a thought and image maker. I'm jumping around a lot. But really what this comes down is to the nature of thought. I'll define a couple of terms here just for the, and this is not, these are things that I felt I've come to an understanding with myself. But I really, like this particular would be coming from dialogues with David Bohm and Krishnamurti, which I suggest looking into. Because David Bohm was a theoretical physicist, a scientist and thinker of the highest order. Definitely not a charlatan. Some may say they don't agree with where he went with quantum mechanics and stuff like this, but you have to acknowledge that he was a top thinker in the world. And then Krishnamurti, who would say, I am not a teacher, I am not a spiritual guide. He was like, truth is a pathless land. No other person could bring another human being to truth. So gurus and teachers, throw it all out the window. Be your own teacher and your own guide. But, you know, there are things that can be used as pointers along that journey, which is what this stuff is. And so they had this dialogue, truth, actuality, and the nature of thought. So let's define the terms, right? We'll say that actuality is everything in nature. Everything that has been created by the creator or creation that is untouched by the hand or mind of man. It's the actual. No matter what we do, we could never change gravity. That which we call gravity, right? And let's say for this, what we're talking about here, that reality will define as that which is touched by the mind and hand of man, or perceived by the mind and hand of man, right? And truth is that which is in the realm of actuality. So we can experience reality, but it in that sense that is touched by the hand and man of thought, but is always limited. Because the thought of man is limited. Our perception is limited. And we need to understand that. Because we take our perceptions of reality, the world touched by the hand and mind of man, as actual. And it can never be. Nothing that comes from the mind and hand of man could ever have the perfection of gravity, that which we call gravity. Because gravity exists before we put a word on it. We may create airplanes and helicopters that act in accord with gravity. Some would say that that is conquering gravity, but it's not conquering gravity. You're flying in accord with it. If you try to create something that goes against gravity and jump in the air, you're just going to crash to the ground. What is being said is that the actual is truth. And our perceptions and thought are simply limited because of the nature of the thought and hand of man. So when we have the joy of a moment, that's actual. That's the truth of it. But when we desire that again, we put the mechanism to work that's limited, because thought is what is being suggested is that all thought is limited, and that the problems created by thought cannot be fixed by thought. Now it's getting a little bit too dark, and I'm not even sure if I'm capturing anything anymore. So, but I'll speak a little bit more about this. I'm not sure if anybody's even interested in this, but I suggest that look at the dialogues of Krishnamurti and David Bohm if you have any kind of interest in this, because not that they are any kind of gospel or lore or any other that mumble jumble, but it's just a couple of people having a conversation with what they feel is a true experience with, I guess, that which we call truth, that which is. All right, take it easy.
Ah, the dirty old blog.